Just imagine getting admitted to a place where everyone has incredible superpowers, except you. That's exactly what happens in today's story. At the beginning of the movie, we meet a boy named Will. He is the son of the world's greatest superheroes, Jetstream and Commander. Just by looking at his family, everyone assumes that he will also grow up to become a superhero one day. Today is Will's first day at school, but this is no ordinary school. It is a special academy that trains the next generation of superheroes. Just before Will leaves for school, his father receives a call from the mayor. After that, both of his parents have to leave immediately for an important mission. After they leave, Will and his childhood friend Layla turn on the TV, where the news shows how Will's parents have defeated a giant robot. After winning the battle, Will's father, Commander, even brings the robot's head home as a trophy. As soon as Will gets on the school bus, he realizes that everyone is treating him differently because his parents are famous superheroes. At first, the bus looks completely ordinary, but after making a huge jump, it suddenly transforms into a rocket and flies towards sky high, a superhero school floating among the clouds. When they arrive, all the new students are amazed because this is unlike any normal school. Every student has some kind of superpower. Some can shoot lasers from their eyes, some can freeze people into ice, and others can even fly. But just like every school, Sky High also has its share of bullies. Some of them begin extorting money from the new students. Just then, the student president, Gwen, arrives and saves them from those boys. The moment Will sees Gwen for the first time, he instantly falls for her. Watching this makes Layla feel extremely jealous. On their very first day, all the new students have to take a test. Based on the results, they are divided into two groups. One group consists of real superheroes, while the other consists of sidekicks who help the superheroes. One by one, every student demonstrates their powers. But when it is Will's turn, he has no choice but to tell the truth. He quietly tells the teacher that he still doesn't know what his powers are. However, the teacher thinks that since Will is the son of legendary superheroes, there is no way he could be powerless. Believing that Will is joking, the teacher throws an entire car at him. Poor Will barely manages to save his life by diving to the ground. Finally, the teacher realizes he was telling the truth and places him in the sidekick class. The sidekick class is made up of students who will one day help powerful superheroes. The school nurse tells Will that his powers may awaken after a few days, so there is nothing to worry about. However, she also admits that there is a very small chance he may never develop any powers at all. The same thing had happened to Sky High's bus driver. When Will returns home, he tries to tell his father the truth. In reality, he has been lying to his parents all this time, pretending that he already has incredible powers just like them. But before he can say anything, his father takes him into a secret laboratory where all the family's special weapons and trophies from past battles are kept. Seeing how proud his father is of being such a powerful superhero, Will loses the courage to confess the truth. Later, we discover that the robot head Commander brought home still contains a hidden camera. Through it, two mysterious people are secretly watching both Will and his father from a distant location. The next day, classes begin in full swing. Will slowly starts adjusting to school life, and he also becomes good friends with everyone in his sidekick class. One evening, Will and his friends are studying together at his house when his father comes home. All the kids are thrilled to meet the legendary Commander. Commander still believes that Will is studying in the superhero class, but after seeing the powers of Will's friends, he immediately realizes that they all belong to the sidekick group. Commander tells Will, "Son, there's nothing wrong with hanging out with sidekicks, but someday you should introduce me to your superhero friends too." Will realizes that he cannot keep hiding the truth any longer. Gathering all his courage, he finally tells his father that he is actually a sidekick. Hearing this completely shocks Commander. He angrily says, "That teacher who tested you must have something against me. That's why he put my son in the sidekick class. Don't worry, son. I'll call your uncle right now. He'll tear the whole school apart." As Commander angrily picks up the phone, his own strength accidentally crushes it in his hand. He tries 3 or 4 times, but every phone breaks the moment he presses a button. Will finally explains that the teacher did nothing wrong. The real problem is that he simply doesn't know whether he has any superpowers at all, and he has been lying to his parents this entire time. His father comforts him and assures him that one day his powers will definitely awaken. The next day at school, some students begin bullying the school bus driver. Will steps in to protect him. The truth is that most students avoid messing with Will because they are afraid of his famous parents. This time, however, the bullies decide to get revenge during lunch. Using their powers, they knock Will to the ground, causing his lunch tray to spill all over a boy named Warren. Warren's father is not a superhero, but a supervillain, and by coincidence, Commander was the one who sent him to prison. Furious, Warren starts throwing fireballs at Will. Poor Will desperately tries to dodge every attack. He crawls beneath tables like frightened prey, while Warren hunts him from above, launching blazing fireballs one after another. Despite the danger, all of Will's sidekick friends rush in to help him. Seeing everyone supporting Will, Warren prepares to throw an even bigger fireball at them. At that exact moment, Will suddenly lifts an entire table and throws it aside to shield everyone. This is the moment when his super strength finally awakens. Warren gets back up and charges toward Will again, but Will grabs a fire extinguisher and sprays him with it. Just then, the school principal arrives and catches both of them. When Will gets home, his father is overjoyed to hear that his powers have finally appeared. To celebrate, he even gifts Will a brand new Xbox. Hopefully, its controller is made of of steel. Meanwhile, those mysterious people continue spying on them through the robot's hidden camera. The next day, Will is transferred from the sidekick class into the superhero class. In his first class, he and Gwen have to work together to build a freeze ray. However, apart from throwing powerful punches like his father, Will doesn't know how to do anything else, so Gwen ends up completing the entire project by herself. During lunch, Will sits with his new superhero friends who refuse to let his old sidekick friends join them. Even so, Will chooses to stay with his old friends. Watching all this makes Layla very upset. To make it up to her, Will promises to take her to her favorite restaurant that evening. Just then, he hears that some bullies have locked his friends inside their lockers. Will immediately rushes over and rescues all of them. Afterward, they make a bet. If Will defeats the bullies in a special game, they will stop harassing the sidekick group forever. The game is simple. A dummy has to be rescued before it reaches a machine that will destroy it, all within a limited time. One team protects the dummy, while the other team tries to stop them. Will and Warren are on the same team. At first, Will struggles to control himself. Finally, he puts all his strength into one massive punch against the ground, knocking every villain off their feet. He then captures one of the villains and ties him up with a rope. Meanwhile, Warren attacks the remaining villains with fireballs and tells Will to save the dummy. Suddenly, an opponent with super speed starts running circles around Warren, leaving him completely exhausted. Seeing this, Will chooses to save Warren first. Then he simply throws Warren toward the dummy, allowing him to grab it just before time runs out. Everyone applauds Will's incredible performance. When Will gets home, he finds that Gwen is already there. They all have dinner together, and Gwen even invites Will's parents to be the honored guests at the upcoming homecoming dance. Meanwhile, Will spends time having fun with Gwen at home, while poor Layla waits alone for him at the restaurant. After a long wait, a waiter approaches her. Surprisingly, the waiter is none other than Warren. The two sit together, talk, and get to know each other better. In the end, Warren invites Layla to attend the homecoming dance with him, and she agrees. The next day, Will meets Layla at the bus stop. Instead of staying angry, Layla actually wants to ask Will to the dance. But before she gets the chance, Will tells her that he is already going with Gwen. Although Layla is heartbroken, she pretends to be happy. To make Will jealous, she lies and says she is going to the dance with Warren. Later during lunch, she walks straight up to Warren and clearly tells him that the two of them will attend the party together. Warren knows very well that this will upset Will, so he happily agrees. After school that day, Will throws a party at his house. He takes Gwen into the secret room where the two share their very first kiss. At that very moment, someone secretly steals a highly advanced weapon from behind them. Coincidentally, Layla also arrives at the party, but Gwen throws her out. As soon as Will finds out what happened, he sends all of his so-called superhero friends away and apologizes to Layla. Will repeatedly calls and texts Layla to apologize, but she never replies. He even asks her to meet him at their favorite restaurant, but she never shows up. On the night of the homecoming dance, Will is sitting once again inside the secret room when his parents give him a special book before leaving for the party. After they leave, Will opens the book and notices the face of an old supervillain. He suddenly realizes that the weapon his father had once taken from that villain is the exact same weapon that has now been stolen. Will immediately calls the school bus driver for help. Meanwhile, at the dance, Gwen declares herself the most powerful superhero. Using the stolen weapon, she transforms all the superheroes into little children. The rest of her friends fully support her. Together, they capture all the superheroes. Only Warren and a few sidekicks manage to escape by hiding inside the school's ventilation pipes. Will reaches the school and apologizes to all of his friends. After that, Warren teams up with the sidekick group to fight the villains, while Will goes after Gwen. Meanwhile, Gwen is holding baby Commander hostage. She reveals that she had once been a student in the same class as Will's parents. During one of their battles, Commander had accidentally turned her into a little girl. Now she plans to transform all the children into evil villains so they can conquer the entire world. But before she can do that, she first has to destroy the school so that no new superheroes will ever be trained again. Will arrives just in time. However, Gwen grabs him and smashes him through several walls. Meanwhile, everyone discovers that Layla is actually incredibly powerful. She had simply chosen not to reveal her abilities. The sidekick team defeats all of the villains, but then they realize that Gwen has shut down the system that keeps the school floating in the sky. The entire school begins crashing rapidly toward the ground. All of Will's friends work together to repair the system. During the fight, Gwen throws Will completely out of the school. At that moment, Will discovers that just like his mother, he can also fly. He flies back through another window and uses both of his powers to defeat Gwen. Afterward, he positions himself beneath the falling school and tries to stop it, but the school is so incredibly heavy that even with all his strength, he cannot hold it up. At the very last moment, his sidekick friends manage to reactivate the anti-gravity device. The school slowly rises back into its proper position. Afterward, all the superheroes are restored to normal. Every hero finally realizes that without the help of the sidekicks, they are nothing. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. The story begins at a large farmhouse surrounded by greenery and complete silence. A husband and wife lived there, longing to hear the laughter of a child in their home. The wife's name was Tori, and the husband's name was Kyle. They loved each other deeply. One night, while they were together, something strange happened. Tori suddenly felt as if something had occurred outside. She asked Kyle if he had noticed anything, but he said no. Tori brushed it off, saying it was probably nothing. However, at that very moment, a loud noise echoed outside, and the electricity throughout the house went out. Looking through the window, they saw a faint red light glowing slowly in the distance, beyond the fields. A series of old home videos then appears, showing a little boy growing up. First, he is seen rolling around in bed, then sitting up, crawling on his knees, and later riding a tractor across the fields with Kyle. The scenes are heartwarming and enough to melt anyone's heart. But this period of happiness was short-lived because what was about to happen next was beyond anyone's imagination. 10 years later, the same house looked older and duller. One morning, Tori was searching for her son, Brandon. She looked all around the house, his room, the kitchen, but couldn't find him anywhere. Finally, she stepped outside, whistled, and waited. After a moment, a whistle came back in response. Tori followed the sound toward an old rusty barn. Suddenly, Brandon jumped out in front of her, scaring her badly. Tori screamed and then lovingly scolded him, saying he was getting too old for such childish pranks. Still, she treated him with the same affection as if he were a little child. Kyle soon arrived and reminded Brandon that he wasn't allowed inside the barn because it contained broken boards and rusty nails. At school that day, the class was learning about bees and wasps. The teacher showed a video and asked what the difference was between them. The classroom fell silent, but Brandon raised his hand and gave the correct answer. He explained that bees help with pollination, while wasps are predators. He continued sharing even more information, causing the other students to grow bored. A chubby boy mocked him, and the entire class laughed. However, Brandon's favorite girl encouraged him. Her small compliment instantly brought a smile to his face, and for a moment, he seemed genuinely happy. Yet in his notebook, Brandon was drawing strange symbols that no one could understand. They looked like an unknown language that only he could read. That night, while Tori was painting and listening to music, a red glow slowly began to rise from behind the barn. A deep, terrifying sound filled the air. The lights in the house started flickering, and the music became distorted. Surprisingly, Tori didn't panic. She simply turned off the music and continued painting, as if she had become accustomed to such occurrences. Meanwhile, upstairs in his room, Brandon lay sleeping perfectly still. Suddenly, something strange stirred within him, as though an unseen force had awakened him. He got up, walked to the window, and without any fear, climbed down and headed toward the barn. There stood a locked door that was always secured with heavy chains. Brandon knelt in front of it and began pulling on the chains. Hearing noises outside, Tori went to investigate. She found Brandon kneeling before the chain door. The moment she touched his shoulder, he jumped in shock. He looked frightened himself and had no idea how he had gotten there. Tori hugged him and gently suggested that he might have been sleepwalking. She took him back to his room and tucked him into bed. She sang him a lullaby and stayed beside him for a long time, patting him softly as though he were still a small child. Soon afterward, Kyle came outside and asked if everything was all right. Tori lied and told him that Brandon had merely been wandering around the house in his sleep. She didn't mention that he had been inside the barn, standing before the chain door. It was a small lie, but one rooted in a much deeper secret. The next morning, Brandon and Kyle were repairing parts of the house together. Kyle handed him a piece of candy and said that when Brandon was little, candy was the only thing that could stop him from crying. Brandon asked, "Did it actually make a difference?" Kyle laughed and replied, "Maybe it did, because you turned out just fine." They both laughed, but there was a hint of uneasiness in Kyle's voice, as if he was trying to convince himself more than anyone else. Later that day, Brandon was trying to start a lawnmower by himself. When it refused to work, he became increasingly frustrated. Suddenly, in a burst of anger, he lifted the heavy machine and threw it across a fence. Anyone witnessing it would have been shocked. When Brandon walked over to inspect it, the mower lay upside down with its blades still spinning. He cautiously placed his finger near the blades, but instead of cutting him, the blade itself snapped apart. That evening was Brandon's birthday, and the family gathered at a restaurant. Tori's sister, Marilee, and her husband, Noah, were there as well. A waitress brought out a cake with a single candle. Brandon blew it out, and everyone cheered. Then Noah presented Brandon with a gift, a rifle. Kyle immediately became angry and said Brandon was still a child and had no business owning a gun. For the first time, Brandon raised his voice against his father, arguing that he was already 12 years old. Despite this, Kyle refused to give him the rifle. Brandon's face turned red with rage. The entire restaurant watched the scene unfold, whispering among themselves. Embarrassed, the family left under the gaze of everyone around them, but this was only the beginning. Back at home, Tori told Kyle that she didn't want Brandon to experience the same rejection and misunderstanding she had suffered from her own parents. She didn't want him to feel alone. They discussed taking Brandon camping, hoping it might help. The next morning, however, Brandon completely ignored his father. At breakfast, he sat silently chewing on his fork. Kyle glanced over and noticed that the metal fork had bent. Alarmed, he called Tori and suggested they search Brandon's room. Inside, they found disturbing drawings depicting blood, severed body parts, and graphic injuries. The sketches looked like something created by a deeply troubled mind. Tori tried to rationalize it, saying perhaps Brandon wanted to become a doctor, but Kyle wasn't convinced. Something felt terribly wrong. That night, Brandon's favorite girl suddenly felt as if someone was watching her inside her bedroom. Strange things began happening on her laptop. When she looked out the window, she saw a shadowy figure standing in the darkness. Her mother came to check, but nobody was there. The frightened girl insisted it had been Brandon. Her mother asked how she could possibly know that in the dark. The girl replied that she would recognize him anywhere. During a camping trip in the woods, Tori woke up in the middle of the night and realized Brandon was missing. She and Kyle rushed out to search for him. Moments later, Brandon suddenly appeared, but there was something unsettling about him. His eyes seemed distant, as though he had returned from another world. Kyle stared at him silently, deep in thought, while Tori once again chose to ignore her growing fears. Back at school, a major incident occurred during gym class. Brandon's favorite girl called him a name he didn't like. Instantly, his anger exploded. He grabbed her arm with such force that the bones in her hand cracked. The girl screamed in agony. Brandon appeared completely unaware of what he had done. The school descended into chaos. Later, the girl's mother confronted Kyle and Tori, calling Brandon a monster. Tori apologized repeatedly before taking Brandon home. That night, an uneasy silence filled the house. Tori confessed something strange to Kyle. Brandon had never been injured, not once. He had never suffered a cut, scrape, or broken bone, not even as a child. For any normal kid, that was impossible. Disturbed by this realization, Tori began searching the internet for answers. Meanwhile, outside, the mysterious red light appeared again. In the pouring rain, Brandon returned to the barn and approached the chain door. This time, he tore the chains apart with his bare hands. When Tori arrived, she witnessed an unbelievable sight. Brandon was floating in the air, surrounded by a glowing red aura. Over and over, he repeated the same phrase, "Take the world, take the world, take the world." Tori called out to him, and Brandon immediately dropped to the ground. For the first time in his life, he had a scratch on his body. Terrified, he looked at his mother and asked, "Mom, who am I?" The question hit Tori like a storm. She hugged him tightly and finally revealed the truth. He was special. He had come from space. Years ago, she and Kyle had discovered him inside a small spacecraft that had crashed near the barn. The ship was still hidden there. As Brandon listened, his eyes filled with anger. "Why did you hide this from me for all these years?" he shouted. In a fit of rage, he smashed objects throughout the house before storming outside. Tori immediately told Kyle that Brandon had discovered the spacecraft. The color drained from Kyle's face. That night, Kyle had a horrifying nightmare. In the dream, he and Tori approached the spacecraft and found a tiny baby inside. Blood streamed from Tori's eyes while the infant stretched its hand toward him. Kyle woke up drenched in sweat. By now, the power inside Brandon had fully awakened. He traveled to the same restaurant where his family had celebrated his birthday. Inside, the waitress noticed strange symbols scratched onto a window. Suddenly, a light bulb overhead exploded. A sharp shard of glass flew through the air and lodged directly into her eye. The waitress screamed in agony and stumbled through the restaurant as panic erupted around her. She grabbed a baseball bat and wandered through the darkness, terrified. Eventually, she locked herself inside the cold storage room, hoping to stay safe. But for Brandon, the heavy door was no obstacle. Using his incredible strength, he sliced the door nearly in half and entered. The next morning, investigators arrived at the restaurant. They discovered the strange symbols carved into the window, but the waitress was nowhere to be found. Back at home, Brandon acted completely normal, as if nothing had happened. His parents, however, were falling apart inside. At school, Brandon began counseling sessions. The situation was unusual because the counselor was his own aunt, Marilee. During one session, Brandon calmly told her that he was different from everyone else and better than them. The statement sent a chill through Marilee. She decided she needed to tell the police. What she didn't realize was that Brandon had overheard her thoughts and intentions. That very night, the lights in Marilee's house began flickering. Soon, her security alarm reported movement in the backyard. Gathering her courage, she opened the door. Standing outside was Brandon. His eyes were cold and his voice was completely emotionless. "Forget about going to the police," he said. Marilee's hands trembled. Still, she replied that it was her responsibility to do the right thing. Brandon turned and walked away. A short time later, Marilee's husband, Noah, returned home drunk. When he opened a closet door, he found Brandon standing inside wearing a terrifying mask. Angry and confused, Noah said he was taking Brandon straight back to his parents. In a calm voice, Brandon replied, "Don't tell anyone." Then he slammed Noah into the garage wall with superhuman force. Terrified, Noah staggered into his vehicle and attempted to escape, but Brandon lifted the entire vehicle into the air and flipped it over. Noah's head smashed into the steering wheel, shattering several teeth. He was left horribly injured. Using Noah's blood, Brandon drew his strange symbols on the ground before quietly returning home. There, he told his parents a fabricated story and claimed he had no idea where his shirt had gone. The following day, Tori and Kyle learned that Noah had been hospitalized. They rushed to see him. However, the doctor informed them that Noah's injuries were so severe that visitors were not allowed. A trembling Marilee revealed that Brandon had come to their house that night. The moment they heard this, the ground seemed to disappear beneath Tori and Kyle's feet. The fear on their faces was impossible to describe. The next morning, Brandon was informed that Noah had died. His expression didn't change. No sadness, no shock, nothing. Kyle couldn't take it anymore and raised his voice. Brandon responded by shoving him across the room. Kyle crashed into a cabinet, dishes shattered, and silence filled the house. For the first time, Brandon had physically attacked his father. That night, while Brandon was taking a shower, Kyle searched his room. There he found a shirt stained with blood. His heart sank. He showed it to Tori and insisted that it was Noah's blood. Tori refused to believe it. She argued argued that Noah had been drunk and that the accident was his own fault. By now, a deep divide had formed between Kyle and Tori. Kyle finally made a decision. He told Tori that he was taking Brandon hunting, just father and son. The next morning, Kyle secretly placed a rifle in the truck and left with Brandon. Before they departed, Tori hugged Brandon and jokingly reminded him to wear his seatbelt, but deep down, she knew Kyle was hiding something. Meanwhile, back at the house, a detective arrived and showed Tori photographs of the strange symbols found on the restaurant window. He explained that the markings appeared to form the letters BB, which could stand for Brandon Breyer. Tori claimed she had never seen those symbols before. The detective left. The moment he was gone, Tori rushed to Brandon's room. There she found his sketchbook. Inside were horrifying drawings: blood, corpses, destruction, and scenes of death. These were not drawings that should have come from the mind of a child. At that moment, Tori finally accepted the truth. Brandon was responsible. The sketchbook slipped from her hands as tears filled her eyes. At the same time, deep in the forest, Kyle raised his rifle. With shaking hands, he aimed directly at Brandon's head and pulled the trigger. But the bullet never harmed him. It bounced off harmlessly. Tears streamed down Kyle's face. He was completely broken. Brandon slowly turned around. His eyes began glowing red. In that instant, Kyle realized the terrible mistake he had made, but it was already too late. Brandon put on his dark mask and cape. Using his powers, he unleashed a devastating attack that blinded his father and ultimately ended his life. It was the darkest and most heartbreaking moment of the story. A father tried to destroy his son, and the son destroyed his father. Back at home, Tori called Kyle's phone. Instead of Kyle, Brandon answered. His voice was cold and lifeless. "Dad is gone." Then the call ended. Tori immediately called emergency services, but the line suddenly went dead. Soon afterward, a police car arrived at the house. An officer stepped out and began calling for Tori. She had been hiding, and when she finally ran toward the officer for help, Brandon struck. The attack happened so suddenly that it was almost impossible to comprehend. Moments later, he turned on a female police officer as well. Tori screamed in horror, but that scream revealed her location. Now Brandon knew exactly where she was hiding. Then in a chilling twist, he whistled the same tune Tori used to whistle when searching for him during his childhood. The sound echoed through the darkness as he slowly began hunting for his own mother. This was the most chilling moment of the entire story. Tori somehow escaped through a window and ran toward the barn. Inside, she found the spacecraft that had been hidden there for years. Suddenly, she remembered something important. A piece of the ship's material was capable of harming Brandon. She picked up a sharp fragment, but there was something even more horrifying inside the barn. Hanging from the wall was the missing waitress who had disappeared weeks earlier. Tori's entire body began trembling with fear. Gathering all her courage, she stepped outside and called Brandon's name. Then she whistled the same familiar tune she had always used to find him when he was little. Brandon appeared before her. Tears filled Tori's eyes. She told him that she had always loved him and that he would always be her son. Then she wrapped her arms around him in a tight embrace. At that very moment, she attempted to stab him in the back with a sharp piece of the spacecraft, but Brandon caught her hand instantly. The pain in his eyes was enough to break any mother's heart. He knew that his own mother had just tried to kill him. First, his father had betrayed him. Now his mother had done the same. Brandon grabbed Tori and flew high into the sky, rising above the clouds. Then he let go. Tori plunged toward the ground. As she fell, Brandon looked down for a moment. Then he noticed several lights approaching him in the sky. Afterward, a television news report revealed that a plane had crashed onto the farm, destroying the house. Nearly everyone aboard the aircraft had died, but one person had survived: Brandon Breyer. The reporter explained that investigators were still trying to determine the cause of the crash and that the investigation was ongoing. However, anyone who knew the truth understood that it had not been an accident. It was Brandon. His powers had grown beyond anyone's control. He was a child from another world, sent to Earth with a mission, and now there was nobody left who could stand in his way. That is what makes the ending so unsettling. The story leaves behind a lingering sense of fear that stays with the audience long after it is over. A terrifying realization that Brandon is no longer just a troubled child, but an unstoppable force whose true purpose has only begun to unfold. In 2043, a mysterious epidemic sweeps across the United States, targeting only children and teenagers. The outbreak spreads at an alarming rate, leaving families helpless as young people begin dying in massive numbers. Strangely, adults remain completely unaffected by the disease. Within a short time, nearly 98% of the nation's children perish, while only a small fraction survive. But survival comes at a cost. The children who make it through the illness undergo extraordinary changes. Each survivor develops strange and powerful abilities that make them unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Fearing what these gifted children might become, the government launches a nationwide program. Parents are ordered to surrender their surviving sons and daughters to special facilities where the children will supposedly receive treatment while scientists study their unusual powers. And at that time, the President of America, President Gray, claims that his son, Clancy, has survived the disease and is currently being treated at the camp for healing, and his condition is getting better. In the camp, doctors and scientists classify children and their disorders into 5 colors. First, it is the greens, for children whose intelligence has increased. The second is blue, for those who have telekinetic ability. The third group is gold, who have the power to manipulate electricity. The first 3 groups are considered to be quite safe and are only being treated in healing camps. The fourth group is the group that is considered dangerous, which is the red color for those who can control fire. And the fifth group is orange, the most dangerous group for those who can manipulate the minds of other people. The red and orange groups are very rare, and the government considers them very dangerous and orders them to be killed immediately on sight. The film takes us to a setting where a little girl named Ruby is celebrating her birthday with her parents. They are worried because all the children around are dead, and only Ruby is still alive. At night, Ruby comes to her mother's room to calm her down, but suddenly she has a strange vision when she holds her mother's hand. In the morning, her mother does not recognize Ruby as her child anymore, and her mother calls the government to take Ruby away to the healing camp. Finally, Ruby is taken with the other children to the healing camp. Every child brought to the camp gets examined by the doctor to determine what abnormality they have. Ruby is taken to the examination where she is identified as being orange, the most dangerous group that can control other people's mind. Therefore, the doctor immediately wants to inject Ruby with lethal injection. But Ruby is able to control his mind and convince him that she is green, the ones whose intelligence has improved rapidly and is not considered dangerous. On the camp, there are 3 groups, green, blue, and gold. But there are no red nor orange because they are all killed immediately on sight. Ruby then lives her life in the camp as a green. 6 years have passed. Ruby, who is working in the camp, is scolded by the camp captain for making a mistake. The captain feels that Ruby is more stupid than the other people there and grows suspicious. However, Ruby's campmate tries to defend Ruby and insults the camp captain, which infuriates him, and as a result, the captain takes her away for punishment. The children are treated really badly in the camp. Later at the camp, frequency tests are often held. In short, this frequency test is a test that uses a very loud sound whose frequency can only be heard by the children. During this frequency test, Ruby faints, and she is taken to a doctor called Dr. Kate for further examination. From the examination, the officer finds out that Ruby is an orange. Dr. Kate secretly writes a note to Ruby that they have found out Ruby is an orange and will kill her immediately. And Dr. Kate tells Ruby to meet her in the boiler room. In a panic, Ruby then directly goes to the boiler room, and in there, Dr. Kate is waiting for her. By that time, the alarm has been sounded for an intrusion, and all officers are ordered to look for Ruby. With Dr. Kate's help, Ruby manages to leave using Dr. Kate's car. But at the checkpoint, Ruby is almost caught, but Ruby uses her power to control the officer's mind to let them escape. Finally, after 6 years, Ruby manages to get out of the camp. In the car, Kate gives Ruby a panic button that can be activated as a tracker if she is in danger. Kate explains that she is part of the Children's League, whose mission is to save children from the camp and fight the government. Kate takes her to a gas station to meet her boyfriend Rob, who is also on a child rescue mission. But when Ruby almost falls and holds Rob's hand, she has a vision of Rob, who seems to like abusing children. Ruby becomes suspicious of their motives. When Ruby changes her clothes at a shop, she suddenly sees a small girl who can manipulate electricity. The girl runs away when she sees Ruby, and Ruby chases after her. The girl then gets into a van, and Ruby follows her to hide from Dr. Kate. The little girl is called Zoo, and she is a mute and always wears gloves due to her ability. Zoo is accompanied by 2 friends called Liam and Charles. Liam is a blue with telekinesis ability, while the intelligent Charles is a green. They agree to go with Ruby and help her escape from Kate. On the way, there is a woman who tries to chase them. Her name is Lady Jane. Lady Jane is a child hunter who works for money. While in pursuit, Kate also tries to pursue them. However, Liam uses his telekinesis power to harass them by scattering the leaves, cracking the road, and even knocking down the trees. As a result, they manage to escape. They also begin to get to know each other better, but Ruby does not reveal her identity as orange and lies that she is a green. Liam explains that they are on their way down the East River to a group of children led by a mysterious person nicknamed the Slip Kid. They don't know the identity of the Slip Kid, but it looks like he's an orange who can control people's minds. He also explains that the Children's League led by Dr. Kate is not a good place to stay. He used to be in the Children's League, where they train children to use their abilities to fight against the government. Liam didn't like the idea of becoming a soldier, and so he eventually left the league. Meanwhile, Ruby and the others spend the night at an inn. Ruby remembers the time with her parents. It is revealed that she couldn't really control her ability, and because of that, she accidentally erased her parents' memories of her when she was a kid. While sleeping, Ruby accidentally touches Zoo's hand and then gets a memory that Zoo, where she used to be in a government camp. But eventually she and hundreds of other children rebelled and fled, and the rebellion was led by Liam. Because of the trauma during her life at the camp, Zoo became mute. In the morning, they go to a long-abandoned mall to shop and pick up some supplies. They really enjoy their moment together, since they never have a normal childhood. But suddenly, their bodies are lifted and controlled by a group of people. Luckily, Zoo uses her electric power to stop it. It turns out that they are also a group of children who have telekinesis abilities. At night, they talk about the Children's Association in the East River and its very secret nature. They know where East River is, but they can't tell Ruby and her friends the exact location because it's a secret they cannot tell. However, Ruby uses her telepathy secretly to make one of them unconsciously gives a clue about the location, which is the letter EDO. Later that night, the genius Charles tries to figure out what EDO is, but he finds nothing. However, after speaking with Ruby about her father being a cop, Charles starts to realize that EDO might be a radio frequency. He concludes that E represents 5, D represents 4, and O represents 0, and he uses the number 540 for the radio frequency. Finally, they receive a message from the frequency and finds that the location is at Lake Prince, Virginia. The next day on the road, they are ambushed by Lady Jane, the child hunter, and she uses the sound frequency of her rifle to incapacitate the children. Luckily, Ruby uses her power to control Lady Jane's mind and gives Jane a deserving punishment. Liam and the others are shocked that all this time Ruby is orange. It turns out that Ruby has lied to them all this time because she isn't proud of her ability. Sometime later, Ruby confides with Liam about her past, and they start to fall in love with each other. Finally, they continue their journey and arrive at Lake Prince, Virginia. There they meet other children like themselves. They are so amazed because they haven't seen that many children in a very long time. They also meet the Slip Kid, and it turns out that all this time, he is the son of the president, Clancy Gray. Clancy is an orange, just like Ruby. At night, they have a party. Liam and Ruby dance together romantically. In the morning, they are all given an assignment, and Ruby is assigned to help Clancy. Clancy tells Ruby that he is one of the first people to survive the terrible disease, and the government used him to experiment to create a cure. But the doctor failed, and his father, the president, lied to the public that they had found the cure. Clancy eventually escaped and formed a children's association where all the children can live safely. Clancy then teaches Ruby how to control her power and control other people's minds without touching their hands, and Ruby finally succeeds. In return, Ruby teaches him how to erase people's memory. However, during this process, Clancy controls her mind and tries to kiss her. Ruby is distraught, and she hits him and leaves. Ruby and her friends finally decide to leave the place, but while on the run, they are ambushed by troops from the camp. Liam tries to fight back, but suddenly he becomes unconscious. It turns out that Clancy has made him unconscious. It is revealed that all this time, Clancy has been the mastermind behind it all. Clancy has contacted the camp captain to arrest all the children. Clancy has been manipulating his father, the president, and taking control of the government using his power. His main goal is to create his army of children with superpowers so that he would never get abused by anyone. Ruby then uses her power to make the camp captain commit suicide, and Zoo controls the electricity to create a trick to escape. Suddenly, armed forces arrive with helicopters to arrest all the children. The troops brought the children in the red group who can control fire. It turns out that they are secretly weaponized by the government, and they set the camp on fire. The battle finally ensues. The Red Army tries to burn Liam and his friends, but Liam uses his power to retaliate. But suddenly, Clancy comes in the middle of the battle and manipulates the minds of all the children there. Liam and the others are forced to leave the location and leave Ruby there, because only Ruby has the power to face Clancy. Ruby uses her ability to create her army. However, Clancy shows his brutal nature and controls their mind to kill themselves by shooting each other. Clancy then tries to use his new memory erasing powers to turn Ruby to his side and forget her friends. But Ruby uses her power to control the pilot's mind, and the helicopter crashes and explodes. Ruby manages to escape the explosion with the help of Charles, but unfortunately, Charles gets burnt and he is severely injured, leaving Ruby no choice but to use her panic button to call the Children's League for help. The next morning, the League squad comes to pick them all up. Charles is immediately taken to the hospital for treatment, while Zoo is adopted by a good family, but Liam is arrested by the League because he has betrayed the League before. The League considers Liam knows too much about the League to be left free. Ruby meets Kate and bargains to release Liam by promising to be a soldier in the League and fight against the government alongside them. However, Kate is sure that Liam will never leave without Ruby, and he won't let Ruby join the League. Finally, Ruby meets Liam. Liam explains that he wants the two of them to stay together and discuss plans for both of them in the future. But Ruby is forced to erase herself from Liam's memory so that Liam can be released and so that she can join and fight with the Children's League. All memories of Ruby from their first meeting in the van, chatting together and dancing together, are all gone from his memory. Suddenly, Liam doesn't remember anything about Ruby, and Liam leaves. Ruby then cries as she sees Liam leave. At the end of the story, Ruby joins and trains with the Children's League. But there is more. The struggle of Ruby and her friends is far from over, because it turns out that Clancy is still alive, and a fierce battle between the two sides will be inevitable. And with this scene, the story finally comes to an end. I hope you liked this video. If you enjoyed it, then please like the video and subscribe to the channel.